Yeah, so last week in Gibraltar, where I live, we had a sort of an informal debate on television, live, broadcasted live, on a program called Viewpoint, where a few people with differing opinions gathered to discuss the issue of abortion and whether or not it should be legalized or any legislation should change with respect to abortion in Gibraltar. Currently, Gibraltar's laws say that it's illegal to have an abortion, and it's penalized by life imprisonment. The only circumstances where abortion is legal in Gibraltar currently would be when the mother's life is in danger, and it's possibly the case when it happens when a woman takes the morning after pill. Sometimes it can result in an abortion if there is a fertilized zygote there. I do want to say that after reviewing the video, perhaps I came across as a little bit flippant in some of the things that I said or the ways that I said them. So I do apologize to the viewers at home and especially the panelists that were there. It's a topic that moves me. It's a topic that I am passionate about, and it's a topic that I hope that this video will help the viewers kind of empathize with where I am coming from, where the pro-life movement is coming from. My view is that from conception, there is a human being existing. I don't mean that in a philosophical sense, although in a philosophical sense I do also hold that. I mean that in a completely biological sense, right? So two cells join together and they create, as I said in the debate, a new being. Okay, it is a being, just like my phone is a being. It's not a human being, but it's a being because it exists. Now, the fact that it grows and the fact that it metabolizes its own nutrients and causes its own growth, even if that nutrient is given to it by Morrison, Zerowski, or its mother, it is metabolizing its own nutrients for its own growth. If you give that embryo or that zygote or whatever you want to call it, if you give that embryo enough nutrients, enough time, and the right environment, it will fully develop. Now, it won't develop into a human being. No, I think it's already a human being by virtue of the fact that its parents are human beings, and the fact that it has human DNA. It's impossible for something that is not human ever to become a human being. It is also impossible for a man and a woman, human beings, to have something that is not a human being. So for that logical reason, I think that a human being becomes a human being at conception. It's not based on religious views, it's not based on philosophical views, it's based on just logic, and it is supported currently, that might change, but it won't change my view, by science. It is supported by science. So biologically speaking, not religiously, not philosophically, biologically speaking, a human life begins at conception, for the reasons I've just named. Now I hope that, again, people seeing this video can empathize and can see my point of view if viewed from the fact that it's a human being. So if it is a human being, then it has a right to life because human beings have a right to life. And therefore, if we end the life of that innocent human being, that would be called killing. And I believe that it is rightly classified as murder and should be penalized by law. In the debate last week, one of the other panelists, Tamsin Suarez, said many times that, look, nobody knows when life begins. It's a kind of skeptical position that, well, nobody knows when life begins, there's no consensus kind of thing, and so we can't really base anything based on life beginning at A, B, or C. So she tried to refute my argument in that way. I think this is inconsistent. I think that, for example, if you're going to demolish a building, you might want to ask, well, are there any human beings inside? If the answer that came to you was, we don't know, I assure you that you wouldn't go forward and demolish the building, you would go and find out. And therefore, I don't think it's a good principle to base a change of law on, as in, we don't know, but let's change the law anyway, let's demolish the building anyway. No, I mean, if we don't know, we really need to find out, because if it is possible that we are killing human beings, if it's possible, then we shouldn't be doing that reasonably. And I think that it is reasonable, if it is true that nobody knows, that it is reasonable to hold off on changing legislation until we can put that question to rest. Another point that was raised very often by this same person was that it's a personal opinion where life begins, or whether or not one should terminate a pregnancy or have an abortion, that it's for the mother or the parents to decide, and it's not for legislation to decide. I don't think that that can qualify as a personal opinion in the sense that it should be respected, because it is an opinion that you hold about something or somebody else, which nobody knows but might have a right to life. If it's my personal opinion that your life is not worth living for whatever reason, that doesn't give me the right to end your life. And so for that reason, having it as a personal opinion cannot justify anything in this in this sphere. Interestingly though, Jonathan, the host, at a later point in the debate, asks this person, Tamsin, when she thinks abortions should be no longer allowed, and she said, well, that's for the medical experts to ascertain. And Polly, the person also arguing pro-choice next to her, said the same thing and echoed her words. Well, if it's a personal opinion, why is it for the medical experts to ascertain? And if nobody knows, then how do all of a sudden the medical experts have this inside knowledge that they can make this decision with? It doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent. And this is what I find very often with the pro-choice side, is that it's grounded in inconsistency, kind of like if you can't convince, confuse kind of thing. And so if one moment they're here and another moment they're here, and it's a viability, well, no, bodily rights, and well, I shouldn't be forced to give blood. Well, it's my body. And they're just, it's kind of like one of those flubbers. You grab it here and it just moves here, and you grab it here and it just goes here. I don't think that this is a good, solid foundation to build legislation upon. We need something which we can hold as consistent in every area, and can kind of unashamedly take into consideration every single aspect and one principle governing all. That makes a good law, I think. Another issue that I've been having to deal with after the debate is that I shouldn't be pushing my view onto other people. I don't think that this is a view that can be held either. I think that that law is there to push its views on other people who aren't keeping to good principles. If you, person A, want to kill person B, the law pushes its morality on person A and prevents the murder if it can. And moreover, if you are trying to tell me that I shouldn't push my morality on people, that's also you pushing your morality on me right now. So we can agree that that isn't a principle that we can hold. If something is wrong, it should be wrong across the board, and we should prevent people from doing wrong things for the sake of their own happiness and the common good. So as you can see, the crux, if you will, of my argument, the crux of my position is the fact that it is a human being. And so it all hinges on that. I mean, there's a pithy kind of statement that puts it well. His name is Greg Koukl, the guy who espouses it, and he says, if the unborn is not a human being, then no justification for abortion is necessary. If it's not a human being, then it's just like having a haircut, cutting your toenails. You're removing cells, human cells even, from your own body. But it's not a person, so it's not a problem. However, he continues, if it is a human being, then no justification for abortion is adequate, sufficient. There's nothing you could say to justify killing an innocent human being. That's my position at the center. That's what undergirds everything that I argue. Now, to get to some more real issues that a lot of people in the world are grappling with, and they also brought it up heavily, was the question of viability. Now, viability, just for those who are unsure of what that means, viability is just the point in which you believe that the baby can sustain its own life outside the womb. It seemed to be the case that the people debating opposite me last week were of the opinion that it was around 24 weeks. We've definitely had babies who are born and have lived before 24 weeks, but there are babies who were born after and haven't. The issue with that is that viability changes with technology. I mean, I'm sure back in the day, 30-week births maybe weren't sustainable, but due to incubators, technology, hospitals, and advances in science, viability has kind of shifted towards the beginning. But it cannot be the case that technology really influences the beginning of your human life. That just doesn't seem consistent. Now, as well, with regards to viability, where you live shouldn't determine whether or not you are a person or whether or not you have a right to life. For example, if you put my son, who's 1.5 years old, into the ocean and leave him there, he'd only be viable for maybe a minute, maybe less. So he's not viable in the ocean, but just because we put him in the ocean doesn't mean he's lost his right to life. Or just because he cannot be in the ocean doesn't mean he's lost his right to life. A friend of mine makes this comparison. It's a bit more outlandish, but the principle is the same. If Martians came to Gibraltar and wanted to put me on Mars, knowing that that was going to kill me, they couldn't say, well, it's all right, you're not a person because you can't survive on Mars. Well, I'm on Earth because that's where I'm viable. You see, humans tend to go where they are viable. I am more viable in terms of happiness because, I mean, the goal of life, let's say, is happiness. I am more happy in Gibraltar. Therefore, being in Gibraltar is more viable and more conducive to my happiness. Also, the amount of environments that a human being is viable in increases as the human being grows. So at the beginning, you're only viable where? Inside the womb. Okay, there's one place that you're viable in. And that's why you're there, because it's the only place you're viable. Now, as you develop, you kind of gain viability in multiple environments. You'll gain viability firstly outside the womb, in normal air, breathing on your own. As you grow even more, you might learn to swim and you might become viable in the ocean for a few hours, and so forth. Technology would also make you more viable than ever expected. It might put you in space. So viability, the environments that we are viable in grow. However, there's something about the womb that tends to make it different than the other environments. So people will say, well, okay, yeah, I understand your argument there, but the womb is different. And the reason that they might say that the womb is different normally is because of an argument that's called the bodily rights argument. So, well, it's in my body, says the mother, so I can do whatever I want with my body. So let's look at that for a second. So firstly, one of the important distinctions to make with the bodily rights argument is the fact that we're not really talking about you having the right to stop caring for your child, you having the right to unplug its care because it's your body. Because that's not really what happens, is it? We're talking about an abortion where a woman will take her child to normally a medical physician that will intentionally kill a healthy human being. And I don't mean healthy as in not disabled. I mean a human being that will live. If given the right nutrients, the right time, and the right environment, as I said at the beginning, it will continue to live, right? So that's very different from unplugging a person's care. So for example, if somebody's on their deathbed and being sustained by breathing machines, you might deem it as okay, and I would agree, to unplug and let nature take its course. But in this case, nature's taking its course thoroughly, full throttle towards life. And to impede that is to kill it and not to let it die naturally. And so that's different. We're talking about killing a human being. However, this unplugging of care in terms of pregnancy, as I will show, is also wrong. There's actually a pro-choice feminist called Sally Markowitz, and she remarks something interesting. She says that this kind of argument is, quote, vaguely disturbing, and she adds that a great deal of feminists consider this kind of unlimited rights to their own body a characteristically male ideal. I find that quite amusing, actually. There's a philosopher called Louis Poyman who is pro-abortion, actually, but he says that this argument fails, this argument breaks down, because you can't actually assert that. He makes the example of somebody sitting on your wallet and you asking them to move, and I say, well, I can do whatever I want with my own body, and so I'm not going to move, and your wallet will stay there. Well, no, you actually have a duty, he says, it's a duty of justice to give to that person what is his, even if it involves you doing something with your body that you don't want to do. And I think that makes perfect sense. There's another pro-choice philosopher called Mary Ann Warren, and she writes something quite interesting that I'll read. The appeal to the right to control one's body, which is generally construed as a property right, is at best a rather feeble argument for the permissibility of abortion. Mere ownership does not give me the right to kill innocent people whom I find on my property, and indeed I am apt to be held responsible if such people injure themselves while on my property. It is equally unclear that I have any moral right to expel an innocent person from my property when I know that doing so will result in his death. This is somebody who is pro-choice, but says this bodily right argument just cannot be sustained. Even the infamous Roe versus Wade case stated something also interesting with regard to this. I'll also read. It says, Justice Blackmun, one of the ruling judges on the case, said, in fact, it is not clear to us that the claim asserted by some amici that one has an unlimited right to do with one's body as one pleases bears a close relationship to the right of privacy previously articulated in the court's decisions. The court has refused to recognize an unlimited right of this kind in the past. And there are many other arguments and statements from pro-choicers that show the decline of that argument, that it cannot be sustained. But I feel like a particularly good one, because it doesn't draw an analogy, is a woman who's pregnant. She wants the baby, kind of really doesn't care. She's like, yeah, big deal, whatever, I don't know. But she has terrible morning sickness, and so she goes to the doctor and she asks for a drug that is incredibly good at dealing with morning sickness called thalidomide. But that drug is illegal, was illegalized after they realized that it normally caused terrible birth defects in the unborn child. Now, if this argument is sustained, then it doesn't matter. It's my body, it's the sovereign zone, if you will. I can do whatever I want with my body. And it doesn't matter if that's going to cause problems in the unborn child. Yet, nobody seriously sustains that argument when applied to thalidomide. That is going to harm your child, right? So I don't think that this bodily rights argument can be given any serious thought beyond that. Now, if we go back to viability, having seen that the womb isn't this special place where the rules are different, and it's not this special environment that the regulations can change in, then how can where you are in the world, in what environment you're in, change whether or not I can kill you, an innocent human being? It doesn't. A viability cannot seriously make you a human being, as we said, because it's changing all the time. It also depends where you are in the world and the care that surrounds you. So it can't be seen as the onset of humanity. It cannot be seen as a criterion for determining whether or not you can be killed. So in sum, I do think that a human being outside the womb is comparable to a human being inside the womb, because I don't think that the womb is a privileged place. And therefore, the reasons that are often given to support the possibility of abortion fall down. Some of the reasons that were given were, for example, I can't take care of my child. I don't have the means to take care of my child. Well, if you have the means and then you lose the means once it's born, you can't take that child's life. Well, why not? Well, because it's a human being. Well, if we agree then now that a human being outside the womb is the same as a human being inside the womb, because the womb is in a privileged place, then it's also wrong for that reason. If we go also to the more difficult questions of abortion, like rape, for example, then how we can see the same thing. How can the way that I was brought into this world determine whether or not I'm allowed to stay in it? My heart definitely goes out to women who have been raped. That should not have happened to you. But there is a human being there. And there is a human being there that didn't choose to be there, but now is, and might want to stay there. But it's not a decision that we can make for them. We cannot kill innocent human beings. That's my argument in a nutshell. There's many more things that we can look at, and there are many more less common arguments that are put forth on both sides. But for the sake of the people that are watching this, and for the people in Gibraltar, I mean, I think that those are the more central issues. And I think that my position wasn't refuted, wasn't really even engaged much other than to disagree on the debate. Nobody told me really why my position was wrong. And this is common with the pro-choice side. They'll just reassert their own agenda, their own side. I don't believe that anyone in the pro-choice camp in Gibraltar actually believes that it is a human being with a right to life and still we can kill them. Because then you should be in jail just for holding that. I don't believe that. But I do believe that they will say things that you want to hear, but then reassert the contrary position again. So, for example, Tamsin was asked if the father has a say, and she said that the father has an equal say because he had an equal share in the conceiving of that child, and so absolutely he has an equal right in the decision. And then in the same sentence said, but the mother's right has an absolute right over the father's. So, whoa, that is a direct contradiction. So, this bait and switch happens all the time. I don't think they're doing it on purpose, but they're just grasping at straws because it's not logical, it's not consistent, and for that reason, I just don't think that a law should be changed based on inconsistent reasoning. Now, I will say something in agreement with them. We need a lot more care for women. There are women, just like Marlene pointed out in her question towards the end of the show, there are women that we saw the week prior in the same television show who, because of the counseling they were given, because of the options and the support they were given, actually opted to keep the child. I think that is fantastic. I think that is great. I think that women should be given the care needed. If you are contemplating an abortion, if you have reason to even think about that as an option, then absolutely care should be given to you. Many people don't know what an abortion is. Many people are pushed into having one, and that shouldn't be the case. They should definitely not be penalized for being pushed into having an abortion, even if they have one. Because if you kill somebody without knowing, it's very different, right? We don't call it murder. We might call it manslaughter. We might not even prosecute you for it. So I think that definitely care needs to be given, counseling needs to be given, and options need to be reviewed with women who are contemplating such a thing. But as with every situation in life, some solutions are just not on the table, and ending someone's life, ending an innocent human being's life, can never, ever be on the table in a just, fair, and equal society.